Well, there are some Washington stories that seem to leap right off the big screen. On the other hand, there are some that go to the big screen. Well, the story of hotshot lobbyist Jack Abramoff's fall from grace is one of the latter. It is now a movie. Bill Plante spoke with the star Kevin Spacey about it. He was here for Casino Jack's premiere last night. Take a look.
The movie is Casino Jack, and Kevin Spacey is with us today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Casino Jack, why?
Well, that was Jack Abramoff's nickname in a lot of circles, Casino Jack, because he had worked as a lobbyist on behalf of many Indian casinos in the work that they wanted in front of Congress in terms of certain votes on certain bills. And so he came to be known as Casino Jack, and we thought it was a pretty spiffy title.
Well, the film sets up this whole sequence where he and his associate, Mike Scanlon, work out a way to get a lot of money from the Indians, and you could argue that they didn't do a whole lot for it.
Yeah, that's certainly what at least Abramoff, one of the things that Abramoff served time in Cumberland, Maryland prison for was this dubious, we're going to do all this stuff, and then it turned out they didn't do nearly the stuff that they said they were going to do on behalf of the Indians.
Well, of course, the lobbyists, of course, are collecting a lot of money to get the lawmakers to do the bidding of the people who are paying the lobbyists.
That's right. That's right. So special interest drives elections. And, you know, look, we occasionally get through an election where ideas aren't outspent.
When you look at the film, it's almost hard to decide who is the bigger villain, Abramoff or Scanlon. Did you get a chance to interview or talk to Scanlon at all?
I never talked to Scanlon. Scanlon didn't, I don't think, talk to anybody. I mean, he might have spoken to Barry Pepper, who plays him in the film, I think, quite well. But I think...
Yes, it's a great job.
It's a really great job. But I think that, you know, what I had to try to do in terms of setting out to play Jack Abramoff was to, in a sense, understand what he was going through. What was he being motivated by? You know, not to play a sort of caricature of a villain, but to try to humanize him, even for people that don't like him, to try to make people understand how he could have made the decisions he made, used the bad judgment he did, and been caught up in what I think is a culture that is, as I say, I think still very prevalent today.
Let's go to the movie for a second. Without giving too much away, there's a scene at the end where you're before a Senate committee and you're imagining what you'd really like to say.
Yeah, that scene was written after we met with Abramoff, because he said to us that if he had known, and at that point he didn't know or think he was going to go to jail, that if he'd known he was going to go to jail, he would have never taken the fifth. And as George Hickenlooper and I drove away from prison that day, we both thought, what would that scene be like? And we reimagined that scene, because originally in the script it was just what he'd done. And we reimagined that scene, and I think what's good about that scene is it highlights the hypocrisy. There were a number of senators, including John McCain, who were sitting on that panel, who were pointing fingers at Abramoff and saying, you're the worst man that ever walked the face of the earth, when they had done exactly what he'd been doing in terms of taking money from Indian casinos that were competing casinos, that they'd taken money from Abramoff. He'd raised a lot of money for individual senators and congressmen who were on that committee. I hope that sort of underscores some of the hypocrisy that happens in this lovely town that we're in.
Well, this movie is great fun for anybody who follows Washington, who lives here, who is involved in any of the various things that pass for useful employment here. But how about the rest of America?
Look, George was always like, I don't want to make a boring movie about, you know, politics. I want to make like Goodfellas in D.C.
And I think that he succeeded in many ways. I think the film is, A, far more entertaining and far funnier than people might imagine it could be. But what we kind of talked about a lot was, I did a film in 2008 called Recount, which was the film about the Bush-Gore election in 2000. Now, you start telling people you're going to make a movie about an election or about a lobbyist, and you can hear the yawning start before. Yeah, exactly, hanging chance. But I think that film as well was very, very funny and very, very surprisingly entertaining, because the circumstances are so outrageous. The choices that people are making, you cannot believe. I mean, you sit and watch these kinds of films and you think, you couldn't write this stuff. And I think, therefore, it's not such an inside film that people outside of the Beltway are not going to enjoy it, and that's the experience we've been having lately.